why you can't achieve it. The Wolf of Wall Street.
The moment you give up is the moment you let someone else win. Kobe Bryant.
If you live to be 100, I hope I live to be 100 minus 1 day, so I never have to live without you. Winnie the Pooh.
Good morning. My name is Justin Flaks, and I am a sixth form day student from West Hartford, Connecticut, at least for another few months, which in some ways is hard to believe. I can distinctly remember sitting in this chapel on my revisit day, already picturing myself standing on this stage giving a chapel talk. Throughout my entire Westminster experience, I have always kept giving a chapel talk as a thought in the back of my mind. Between freshman and junior years, I started writing this speech maybe 20 different times. However, this year, as my date approached, I became hesitant, unsure of what I wanted to write about. I started coming up with all types of topics that I'm sure would have blown you all away. For example, who doesn't want to hear me talk about how competitive golf is a metaphor for life? Or how the TV show Billions is an example of how to use power and influence to succeed. Ultimately, though, I was able to boil my speech down to one essential question. How do you define your experience at Westminster? That said, some of you may need some context as to how I got here. As a freshman, I approached campus with an obscene level of confidence. Not to be confused with what one might call the absurd level of confidence I have now. I have been slightly off. From elementary school through middle school, I had always been the highest achiever. Not a high achiever, the highest achiever. Student council president, A-team basketball player, recess football captain, recycling team coordinator, king in the first grade medieval parade, even fifth grade reading champion. And my record still stands, in case any of you were wondering. Basically, if you named any accolade or competition, I either won it or was actively trying to sabotage the person who was beating me. Naturally, I approached Westminster with that same exact energy. The very first question I asked my advisor, Mr. Briggs, was when the student leadership elections were and how I could get involved. I asked him about what the typical campaign budget looked like and when I should host my campaign kickoff party. He quite literally laughed in my face. Was I a little frustrated at the time? Yes. Do I now see why he laughed? Maybe a little bit. Needless to say, when election season came around in the winter term, I had my eyes on the presidency. As they started reading off names in the atrium, I was happy that I did not hear my name included in the class officer positions. My good friend Liam Seeley's name had been called, and, as he will attest, I had been outdoing him for years already. So I expected this election to be no different. I started to compose myself for the impending announcement. Fix my hair, maybe give a courtesy presidential wave to the school. This was my big moment, I thought to myself. The first step in my high school journey, so filled with success, I could already envision the documentary on my ascension in my head. Then my name was not called. My first instinct was to ask Mr. Gritzmacher for a recount, or maybe even go straight to Mr. Phillip. I refused to admit defeat. I thought that there must have been some type of mistake. Eventually, it sunk in. I had lost. I'm not going to lie, I was really disappointed in the moment. But the loss hurt less and less each day. And after a few months, I moved on with excitement to the golf season. I looked at the season as a fresh start for me, which, in a way, it was. I was very excited for the golf trip. The courses were supposed to be really cool, and we were going to Florida, which I love. If you know me, you probably know that I have a borderline unhealthy obsession with South Florida for a multitude of reasons. Anyways, I embarked on the journey with a bunch of people I did not know who I hoped to call teammates. I was already friends with the captain, Jack Griffith, as he was in my advisory. He told me I had nothing to worry about, so naturally, I didn't worry about anything. This was my first time spending an extended amount of time with upperclassmen, and boy was I unprepared. Somehow, freshman year me did not really understand the concept of knowing your role. A moderately shorter, much rounder version of me immediately started trying to chirp Grant Noble, thinking I was one of the guys and that I was funny. This did not end so well for young Justin. In the immediate short term, I was pushed down into a group of cactus bush plants, which took me about 30 minutes to get out of. I emerged, covered in scratches and thorns, looking like I had just participated in a war with the cactus. I proceeded to walk around the golf course and clubhouse the rest of the day with a few different large holes in my shirt. I don't think my mother has forgiven Grant for that one yet. But the long-term consequences of my overzealous actions did not even come close to the long-term ramifications. Over the course of the spring term, Grant came up with a very distinct way of pronouncing my last name, something that still echoes in the halls of Westminster today. Thank you, Chich. As a third former, I hated this new nickname with a passion, which of course only made things worse. Not only was it annoying for the remainder of the trip, but when we returned to school, other sixth formers had caught on too. Then the rest of the school followed suit. Soon enough, I couldn't step foot in the atrium without having hordes of people I did not know yelling my name in weird ways. Some of my personal favorites were Flaks and Show Me the Car, Flaks, which I'll admit are quite funny. This continued through the end of my freshman year. As I rose from freshman to sophomore year, I was met with more disappointment, more losses in student government, more random things I was not selected for, which at times did not seem equitable and were not always easy to accept or understand. The same trend continued through junior year, leading to more and more frustration on my part. So let's return to the question of how I would define my experience at Westminster. If you asked me this question roughly 8 months ago, at the end of my junior year, I would have given a simple one-word response: failure. In retrospect, I can see why I was so frustrated in the moment. After not being selected to John Hay for a third time, but to characterize an entire 3 years as a collective failure is incorrect. Sure, I did fail or lose at things that were important to me, more times in 3 years than in the entire rest of my life, to be frank. I put myself out there and genuinely desired to contribute more to our school community. However, I also won numerous times as well. Looking back on the golf experience freshman year, while in the short term it was annoying, to say the least, I was on varsity as a freshman and was a key contributor, something that had been a goal of mine for as long as I can remember. Secondly, the upperclassmen on the golf team indirectly forced me out of my bubble. While I may not have enjoyed being chased around campus by juniors and seniors yelling my name at me, I became more involved in the school community. Looking through the years, I built great relationships with faculty members, like my advisors, Mr. Briggs and Mr. Griffith, my coach, Mr. Marco, or other teachers, like Mr. Stevens and Miss Heckman. I had important successes academically, performing near the top of the class, and on the golf course. Being a member of the team last spring that won the Founders League for the first time in almost 15 years, at our rival's home course, will be an accomplishment that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Like many of you, I imagine, I have always been told that the most important thing to do is to learn from your losses. This adage has been repeated so many times that I feel it has lost most of its impact on me. Frankly, winning is easy. You celebrate briefly, then it is on to the next item on the list. Losing is when true growth can occur, and character can be demonstrated. After a loss, I have found the hardest thing to do is to look at myself in the mirror and answer a single question. Why? In athletics, this is generally simple. You can always blame it on something else, the weather, your opponent, or any other factor that is out of your control. It is after the losses that you have no one to point to but yourself that you can truly see what you did wrong and make the necessary changes to improve. This last spring, many asked me what was the point of running for student government again. In all honesty, I had a very small chance of being elected. Knowing this, I still ran for class officer, wanting to give it one last try because I had a genuine interest in making a positive difference in our community. I lost again. Looking back, I have absolutely zero regrets. Looking at myself before Westminster, I may have been successful, but I was not yet learning how to not win, how to find resilience, how to get up when you have been knocked down. And this, I have come to believe, is the most challenging test any of us might have to eventually be able to win at. It is through all of these experiences that I have been able to learn how to succeed the most. I think about Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. He was cut from his high school basketball team. Later, after retiring from the NBA with 6 championship rings, he said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed." It is essential to keep pursuing your goals in earnest, regardless of the outcome. The goal of our high school experience is literally to develop as a person. And as I can personally attest, there is no better way to do so than by having the courage to put yourself out there, being self-reflective, remaining true to personal values, and having the resilience to never, ever give up.